So welcome, Joanna, to the Emily Quotient. I finally changed my
Hello.
podcast name. I think it'd be fun to share with everyone how we met first in Singapore. Do you want to give context about like who you are and like how we met?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, sure. I'm Joanna and I'm Singaporean. So of course I met Emily in Singapore. But I think also at the same time, I used to stay in Shanghai. So it was kind of like because of COVID that I came back to Singapore. So I think it was kind of fate that COVID brought us together because I was looking for a job and Emily was hiring. So Emily was actually my manager. Yeah, that's how we actually met.
Yeah, I remember you walked in when we were doing interviews, and then I
Yeah.
remember like, oh, I was like, I feel like she's really professional. Like I could have, there was like this energy about you where I was like, I think she gets shit done. And then we like went through the interview process, and I remember I really liked your international background because that meant that you weren't afraid to like try different environments and like move abroad. So that's one of the things I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the office that I had the interview at, it was kind of like a just a room in like a building, right? And
Yeah.
because of COVID, so a lot of people were on like still like working from home or like doing remote work.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like weird to start my first job that way. But
Mm.
then the colleagues there they were all like very international, which was what I was looking for. Because when I was back in China, I kind of like the variety of like having different people working together, like having different ideas. So I think like that kind of like a good it was kind of like a good landing step for my first job. And you were there to kind of like guide me along. And I think the interview process was like really smooth.
It was so
I
relaxed, wasn't it?
I was like so worried about it. And I think it also opened my eyes to how interviews could be different, because I did interviews in China, I did it in Singapore when I was still an intern. And they were like really very structured questions, but this was kind of like more of like wanting to know each other. So I think it just kind of opened my eyes to how things could be different when different cultures are involved, or like when different people come together. And yeah.
I still remember. So the room itself is very long and rectangular, and there's like three tables on one side, three tables on the other side. The interview was like you in this like swivel chair, and then it was like me, and then the two other of my colleagues just sitting there, and then we're like asking you questions.
Yeah, and like there was like this colleague that's on the laptop as well.
Oh yeah.
So so like you were sitting right here, and then like another colleague was sitting here, and there was like a laptop right in front of us. And then
Yeah.
like you ask different questions from like different directions, right? So I was doing this, I was doing
Oh yeah.
this. And then after that, when I got into the job, apparently like one of the leadership members, they say like, oh, thank God you didn't have like the meeting with the CEO or something, because he's like this moving here and there. And I was like, but that's just how the situation is. Like you learn to adapt. And I
Yeah.
mean, the point is that I got in.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean like Joe and I we worked together for almost a year, and then yeah, and then you like stayed on, and then I moved elsewhere into a different company. And I think it was around when Asian Water Woman was also trying to evolve into like the Web3 space that you also like helped with that. But I think what was like the biggest partnership or collaboration that we've done together was the travel summit where you were the events director. And that was such a huge lift. And I honestly like applaud Joe. Like I don't think I could have done it without you because you just did so much. Um, I guess when we were thinking about planning the event, what was your motivation, right? Like, why did you want to do this? Like, what were you thinking back then?
Oh, I think the motivation was you actually. Like my trust in you.
It's a lot of
Because
trust.
I honestly, I think like it's actually more than a slightly more than a year like that we worked together. But essentially back then we were just like a two-person team. And I think like out of the two of us, I'm always the one that's more skeptical, right? I'm always like, oh my God, are you sure we should do this? Like, what about this and this? Like, have we thought this through? But I think you're the one that's always been like very enthusiastic, and you're like, hey, like let's do this. I think we can make it work. So I think when you first raised the idea up to me, I was really, of course, very skeptical as the person that I am. So you're like, oh my God, like let's do it in Taiwan. I was like, are you sure? Like I'm in Singapore, you're in US. Like how are we going to plan this? Like not even when we're in the same like event space. Because we just had one in Singapore, right? And that one went well because I was in Singapore. So I think a lot of times the motivation, like it started off like thinking that okay, I think if Emily like thinks that this might work, I mean I can trust you enough to see how things are because you kind of like when we were still like working there, you started out Asian Wonder Women, right? Which was back then AFN.
Mhm.
And it started from like you showing me 5 members to how it kind of like became a community of 2,000 members. And I saw like how you actually work towards it. So I kind of can believe that you have that vision to actually make it work. And I just need to be able to execute to be able to do that. So I think that was the motivation at first, but as it got along, it was more of that I saw people taking interest in it. And then again, it was more of like now that we have people who really want to come and attend, then I can't let them down.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think it was having a lot of people to subscribe to that vision and our volunteers, like our 14 volunteers who actually like really worked very hard during that few months as well, like that 6 to 9 months. I think having so many people believe that, hey, this might work, it kind of like just pushed you to go on because like you have this group of people who believe in the same thing and are willing to work together. Yeah. But what
Yeah.
was it like for you?
I I feel like I definitely lead with like blind optimism most often of the time, right? Like it's funny because whenever I think of an idea or I plan something, I never think of like failure. Well, I mean, I
Mm,
do sometimes, like in the way dark back places in my head, but usually it's more of like, oh, I want to do this, so therefore I will, right? And I like that when we work together, like I definitely am the one who has like all the crazy big ideas, but then you're the one who like keeps me in check, who like in terms of like liability and like all the healthy things that you need to do in order to run like a business or a project, like you help me like organize and like create like a plan, right? Like there's actual like strategy behind it. So I think in that sense we work really well together. There was one point where we started the event and then it got closer to like actually booking the venue. I
yep.
think that was like maybe end of November, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think once we booked the venue, I was like, okay, we have we put money into this, and now we're like actually going through with it.
Yep.
And then it hit even harder when people were like starting to pay, and I was like, this isn't just like a small event. This is like people are like putting money into this, like they actually expect results. And then I think when we started having our weekly syncs or monthly syncs with the team, like the broader team,
Yeah.
then as you mentioned, I was like, oh, people are actually like buying into this vision that we have. And I don't know, just kind of like sometimes I'm like, did it actually happen? Like, did we manage to pull this together? Like we
I
did,
know.
right?
And it's like now it's May, right? We ended like the summit around like early April, but it
Yeah.
felt like it's just been months away, even though it's just been a month.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it just everything feels so surreal. Also because partially because maybe we've been working over like this for like almost a year, right? Like you started from like the brainstorming phase to even getting to the point where we had like volunteers joining us.
Yeah.
It took like at least 4 months to actually get things down in place before we actually got volunteers. So it felt like a really long project which like finally ended. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I want to also touch upon too, like how you built out the dashboard or like the backbone of the entire event, right? So
oh,
like the Notion, so Joe built like this awesome Notion dashboard where it's like each team's manage different like assignments or like sections of the event, and then there's like shortcut links, like things that like kind of connect the dots. What like where did you learn that from, and like what were you thinking when you were like building that out for the team?
um well, I don't know where I learned that from actually. I think it was just a combination of how many like smaller events that I used to do back in Shanghai. Because we were like part of this like the community in Singapore, like of Singaporean students in Shanghai is really small, but we
Mm,
have like a huge business like community over there.
mm,
And like during National Day, Singapore's National Day, people can't go home, then they will be part of this like huge National Day dinner, which actually a lot of like businessmen, even in China, they will come and attend because sometimes ministers join as well. So I was part of that event where they had like 700 to 800 like attendees in total, but it wasn't like the summit. It was just like a sit down like dinner, and I was there just to host, but to actually plan that as well.
mm,
So I think that was the first time I actually planned such a huge event of even though it was just like a few hours event, but the kind of like the preparation process was actually very scattered in a sense. So I was like seeing like how people ran about and all that, and there was like no documentation in place. So even things whereby like, I can't be in every meeting, but I want to know like what's happening in other people's like departments or like in their groups, so that hey, maybe I could be able to step in to help. Or like if even like for example, if I'm doing sponsors and I see like, hey, this is better to be a partner, like partnership deal, and if I could see like where people's progress are at, this thing could have been like linked faster. So I
mm,
think like it was kind of like experiences that I had before that came to this point. And also when we were working together at the other company, and you were actually very organized in like using Notion. You're the one that actually introduced Notion to me. So you had that framework out already, and I was like kind of like bring everything together to see like what we kind of needed. So in this like summit, the notion was more of having an overall view of the kind of like speakers wish list that we wanted to get, even like the entire event overview rundown that we planned together first, right? And then
mm,
splitting it down into sections. I think they have it's kind of like letting them own their own sections. And then after that, in their own Notion page, they could like do their own brainstorming, and people come in and leave comments. Um, but I think minus of that, the most important part for me was actually the meeting notes.
mm,
Um, I wanted everybody to be able to write down what they spoke about. Like even if it's a one on like you and me, like we also put it in the Notion, because like it's easier for everyone to see like, hey, where the organizer's mind is at, where can I step in to help. So I thought that was more important because kind of like what do you call that? Like the accountability, but also the proactiveness of being able to step in when needed
mm.
is very needed for a very lean team, because everybody's like doing that one thing, and we need as much help as we can. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point that you bring up on documentation because we were also taught that at Stripe. Like they document everything from like the smallest project to like the largest event. One thing that that speaks very truly to is like giving everyone accountability and like ownership to own their own space and like build it out. And you were like the creator of this as well. And like you were the one who ran the meetings, the one who built the framework for everyone, and you were like propelled into this leadership role, right? So after kind of like jumping into this new persona of like being a leader, right? Leading these volunteers who are kind of, doing this project for fun, like what were your thoughts on getting them to be like motivated, and like what were your like new learnings in that sense?
Oh,
Ah,
I think like that's a huge question in a way
it
that
is.
um, I think our volunteers in all of our volunteers, they were actually like really motivated on their own already, to some aspect, because they have been a part of this community for a very long time. So for them to be able to come together and they genuinely wanted to do this, that in itself actually helped a lot already, because I think you and I, we were like busy at different timings. So you when you, I think when you first started, like you still had like another like commitment to make in
Mm,
your career, right? So I was like starting it off, but then after that it became me who actually had a lot more things, so you had to like kind of like help me out a little bit more as well. So I think that balance was already there, which helped me in that sense, whereby like, hey, when we spoke to um our volunteers during the monthly meetings, it was more of like being able to bring updates in which we were able to like kind of do that a lot. In terms of even the smallest things, right? Like seeing how things came out. Like for example, hey, we started our event sales today, or even when we started and when we printed our small stickers. I think even showing small steps of progress made them feel like, hey, this was happening. They're whatever they're working on, it's like taking shape, and people are really like coming to join. So that, I think having that feel of like people really, really flying down to join the event was enough motivation to keep them going in that sense. And also a lot of the times these volunteers, our volunteers actually, they really, really just want to speak to people, they want to meet more people. So them having that space, or like giving them the chance to actually talk to the attendees beforehand, or even like answering some questions and all that, I think that helped a lot. But that's me. But yeah, do you see it differently though?
I guess in the sense of like leading the entire event. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, personally, like I've never led a big team as well, right? It's usually like, an intern or like a coordinator, like, like more small scale things. So I think for me, it was really interesting trying to understand the motivations of people who wanted to contribute to a larger picture, right? Like what were their motivations and like how could I help them? Because technically they're doing this as a volunteer, right? They're giving their like free hours to support this cause. So I think in hindsight, and you know this as well, like obviously like people are busy all the time. So our volunteers did drop off in the beginning, right? A lot of people had different commitments. But then I think as our team got leaner, and stronger, we were able to move a bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately for me, like my learning was the communication part to the team, like being super transparent, communicating consistently, like sharing all the resources so that people could understand like where things were and they didn't have to ask questions. They could, have the autonomy to find it themselves. Um, do I like do I personally like managing people though? No. I don't. Like I
I
think right? Like do you like managing people? I like working with people, but I don't like managing people.
yeah, I think this like, but the thing is you manage me, like in a proper work setting. I think
Mm,
it's so I think I found the difference was that like when things are in like a proper business setting, and when things are on a voluntary basis, you kind of have to lower your expectations, which I think I have very high expectations of myself, and
mm,
it's like it leads to like me having high expectations of other people as well. Like maybe even just like a simple thing of time frames, right? Like I can get this done in this period of time, but like sometimes like I forget that, because there's like time difference, there's like people with like different family commitments, and things are happening here and there. And the thing is, a lot of our community members, they are on the move all the time,
mm,
so the time changes happen very frequently, and I think that was like more difficult to manage. I'm like, how do big companies actually do that? I it's kind of like it's impossible to have people in all different like locations, and you try to get them together in one space, and it takes a lot of commitment on their part as well. So am I like a good leader? I don't know. I don't think so. I think this is like my first try. um but I think like there was a lot to learn in terms of even just managing people emotionally.
mm,
um yeah, like, when they come and tell problems that, hey, I can't do this now because of ABC. How do you respond to it? Like, the kind of empathy that's needed. Now that I work with like three different managers, I kind of see like where my managers are coming from as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think as an operator, you kind of have your scope of work and you like focus on it, but then a manager is like you just have to problem solve like constantly, right?
Yeah.
And then you need to have good judgment too and act accordingly in a professional way. There's like so many parts to it, which leads me to the actual event, which we can like talk about too. So what was your biggest like I guess takeaway from planning the event? And then we could also talk about like little things that we like stumbled into, like problems we
Yeah.
stumbled into, and then our wins to wrap up
Yeah.
well in a bow. But yeah, what was your like biggest takeaway, I guess? Let's start with that first, and then we could talk about other things.
I I think my biggest takeaway, I have two actually. So
Mm,
one is more of like the event in general. Like what I actually learned from organizing the event was that you actually don't need to cram a lot of things
Oh yeah.
in order to make people interested in something. So for example, like we tried to cram um days and days of events into one like a 4-day itinerary, right? Because we wanted like the attendees to make the most out of their buck. Like we want to make sure that hey, like they really, really enjoyed it and they learned something from it. So we kind of like put talks after talks after talks. And I realized that a lot of people told me after that that they actually just want to speak to each other.
Yeah.
Then I was like, okay, like even the travel itinerary, like we went so far away and you were like, hey, it was nice to actually go somewhere further, like look at some views and all that. But actually we are okay with like sitting at the cafe talking to each other.
For hours.
And I was like, oh, I didn't think of that because I think like most of the events that we usually go to, like even for business events, they're always like packed to the brim.
Hmm.
Because you want them to be able to take away something, right? But I think in that sense, our community itself was founded upon like friendships and also to get to know people. So I think my biggest takeaway was that actually when people really, really enjoy being in each other's company, a lot of things are like it's kind of like the half the battle won. Of course you have to create like good materials and all that, but the most important thing was to be able to facilitate that connection, which I think like in the future, like this is more of the direction that we'll be taking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was like my mm,
Yeah, I think
yeah, my
you're
biggest takeaway.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think in the sense of like being able to facilitate the right environment and then
Mhm.
put the right people together, that offers a lot of value. And in the sense where it's like, yeah, some people just want to meet each other, like meet the right people and make these like meaningful connections. And for sure, I think in the future we'll be creating more events like that. But you said you had two takeaways, right? So that's your first.
Yes.
What was your second one?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the second one was like for myself.
Okay.
I was so overwhelmed actually. I think you were overwhelmed as well, right? Like I think by the time like every day ended, like we were just like knocked out dead.
Yeah.
Um Oh, it's real. I think like for me, I'm like an introvert, and it was just a lot of like sensory kind of like
Mhm.
overwhelmed by like a lot of sensory distractions, like having to say hi to people, but because like I was still so busy with things, I couldn't like really sit down to talk to people. And most of the deeper conversations I had were actually after I came back to Singapore, and then we had like several meetups to actually like talk about stuff. So that was when I actually connected with them better. And I realized that a lot of people who were also introverts at that event, um
Yeah.
like I remember I was at the Gold Museum in near Jiufen, and there was just a, a bunch of people just sitting at the stool and like just staring into space. And I was like, oh, why are you not walking around? It's like an ecological park. There's so much to see. And I think they were just like so overwhelmed by the past 2 days that they
Yeah.
just felt like it was so much better to sit down and like just stare into space. And after a while, I actually did that as well. Like I just wanted to like sit down and stare into space. So I think my other takeaway was like having more space to breathe in between, especially when it's such a long event like this. Is really important. Not just for myself, but also for other people that you talk to as well. Because like if you can't even bring your best self to the event or like to the place or to the people that you actually speak with, like both sides they don't get the best experience out of it. Like people won't be able to get the best out of you or like to make better conversations as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point because I think after day two, like, or no, during day two, I was like not the best version of myself. I think I was just highly irritable. I was like, don't talk to me. I was like, don't want to be like no sensory overload. Like it was something that I realized as well. I was like, oh, I wish we had created the space, more space for people to just like what is the term you always say in Chinese, like noir? Or just zone out or stone out or something like that.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah,
word
something like that. Yeah.
yeah. So I agree with you on that part. I think
Mm.
definitely we were trying to maximize the value for everyone, which I feel like we did, but we didn't have to. Yeah.
But
But
what was the most unexpected thing for you to do?
unexpected,
Yeah.
I think so. Okay. So for me, I don't like emotions, right? Like I'm not a very emotional person in the sense where like I don't like talking about like my vulnerabilities or like crying, like things like that. It's just not who I am. So when I was
Mm,
planning this summit, it was more so focused towards like, inspiration, like career inspiration, building businesses, like coming with a more business hat. What surprised me the most was almost like the purging of emotion from a lot of the women who didn't have a great relationship, perhaps, with like the Asian female community, who were maybe bullied, who felt like they didn't belong, who, did never really did the internal work. And then because we had coaching and like these like conversations about our identity and culture, then
mm,
they were like purging it out and like releasing it. So in a way, it was a very pleasant way to see
mm,
it and to feel it and to like interact with it. And that made me realize like there's it's hard to be put in a space where you can meet so many women like yourself and have these deeper conversations. Like people don't have these conversations. Like I don't feel like I
mm,
have these conversations with my sister often. Maybe it's like once a year, but I think we really touched upon something like important, and I think that was unexpected for me.
mm.
What about you?
I think there was this talk as well, right? That was hosted by one of our volunteers, Lydia,
Mm,
talking about what it means to be an Asian woman. And that is also like traveling, right? And I think one thing that was brought up was also that a lot of us Asian women who are traveling the most, we have like the strongest passport in order to make it happen, but we fail to kind of recognize that, hey, even as in the Asian women community, there's also people with like weaker passports, the kind of like stress they have to face every time they do a visa. um One of our volunteers, Sasmini, she's Sri Lankan, and I think I wasn't I didn't sit through the entire talk, but it was kind of a pretty emotional one, just to hear through like how she struggled, like how she had to stay in Sri Lanka for 6 months because like a certain embassy forgot her passport and it was just lying there, and she just couldn't go anywhere because her husband and her are both digital nomads, right? And they have been traveling so much, but because of their passport being like forgotten, they have just been stuck at one place, and that kind of like also created a lot of like stress and a lot of different kind of like logistics they have to actually like scramble to get through that part. So I think just actually being able to understand as well that even though we are in the same community, but everybody's struggles are different because of nationality. I think it kind of like gave people a better sense of like what it actually is, yeah, or like uh, how situations are different, yeah, and that actually strong passport is actually a privilege to have. Yeah.
yeah, no, I agree. I think it's actually like a big awakening for a lot of us too, who
Mhm.
don't really think in that frame. Like for me, like I have an American passport and it is obviously quite strong, but in some ways, yeah, it makes me more empathetic, right? It makes me more
Yeah.
wanting to like create more inclusive spaces with awe, like in the future
Mm,
of like, if we have, I don't know, like travel scholarships or like you've mentioned, like,
mm,
intentionally choosing places that are easier for people to access, right? And so like um, yeah, I didn't see the panel as well, but I heard good things from it. And
yeah.
yeah, I applaud Sasmini for being vulnerable and like sharing her experiences
Mm,
because it's tough to
yeah.
talk about.
Yeah, I think yeah. So I think the other thing for me was that, as sometimes as organizers of the event, like you have to be very on point, and you're like just running about like trying to get things done and all that. But I think our attendees were very, very kind. They will come over to you and they will like ask you how you are, like they try to like learn more about you, and kind of like thank you for organizing the event. But one thing that was unexpected for myself was like I didn't expect to kind of like cry.
Mm,
I like during the part where it was during wandering time on
mhm.
the second day itself, I was still like very stressed out by like certain things for the travel and all that. And then one of our speakers, Ray, just came over and I was just talking about my career, like what I was like planning to do and all that. And I think somehow I feel like our attendees are like pretty in touch with their inner self.
Yeah.
And as I was talking to them, I started crying. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm an organizer and I'm supposed to be like leading this event, but I'm here like crying in front of our speakers. But they were all like really comforting and like empathetic. And I
Mhm.
think that was also the point whereby, I feel like I started to be more in touch with myself, or I finally feel like I'm on the ground. Also
Mhm.
because for the past like 1.5 years or so, I've just been like moving very quickly, and I didn't have time to stop to really think about what I wanted to do next, or like even for my own personal self, like where I wanted to grow towards to. So it was kind of unexpected for me, because then all these like coaches, they were actually there to kind of like help me in that
Yeah.
way. Gave me a lot to think about. Yeah,
I think we're privileged to have many coaches there, right? Who
for
ask
sure.
the right questions to make you think very deeply, like intrinsically. And
Mm,
honestly, like I mean, I think you and I are similar in the fact that we are operators, like we move very quickly, right? And we're very task oriented. We
yeah.
execute on things. But and the work that we do is more around like supporting other people, right? Like we're always like focused on other people that maybe in that moment when you were asked questions about yourself and you were like
Mm,
forced to confront those things and like articulate them, then you
yeah.
realized, wait a minute, like, this is something that's been bottled up for a very long time and then it came
Mm,
out. So I love that it happened because that made you more aware, right, of your emotions.
yeah, for
I
sure.
guess like taking that to now, like how are you going to address it in the future? Like how are you moving forward? And do you want to share what the I-Jing person told you to do?
Oh.
Do you want to explain it very briefly and then what you learned from it? Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, like, I didn't expect someone like Sylvie actually I-Jing to actually be at our summit, because we had a makers fair, right? And I was like, hey, let's try to get our women to showcase their services, their products, or like even their artworks. And Sylvie reached out to us, Ever Brightness, I think. So she had like I-Jing, and I-Jing is kind of like a traditional Chinese way. It's not really fortune telling. Think of it as like fortune telling plus tarot, but the in between of it, I feel maybe Sylvie would explain it differently, but in for me it was kind of like that way. So it kind of like reads off your energy, but then answers your question. So maybe kind of like Chinese tarot.
Hmm.
We'll have to ask Sylvie for the exact explanation actually. But I feel like it has a lot to do with Taoism as well. Yeah, so the kind of question I asked was whether like my career direction was in the right place. And one of the things that Sylvie brought up was that I have like this ball of fire within me, and like I've just been charging and charging, and because of that I can't make decisions clearly, because when you're in that phase of like moving and you want to get something done, you don't have time to sit down and like try to calm yourself down, and then so your vision is clouded. And so what she kind of like advised me to do was to do flower arrangement. And I was like, when I came back to Singapore, I was putting it off for a while, but it has been at the back of my mind. And then finally this month I had some time, so I'm going for a flower arrangement next week. Um yeah, I think I'll take some videos of it and then I'll share it with you, Emily. But yeah,
Okay.
that
Yeah.
was like part of the experience, yeah, at I-Jing.
I think it's great because I think like tahua or like flower arrangement is
Yeah,
very good for the soul because you're working with your hands and you're
yeah.
focused on this one thing to like create something beautiful. So yeah,
She,
I'll want to
yeah,
know how
actually
it
was
goes.
yeah, she also actually asked me to go swimming, but I just dyed my hair in Taiwan.
Oh,
So
not I know, not the hair.
I'm
Maybe
like,
something
okay,
similar
not
like
happening.
yoga. Yoga, maybe.
I guess so, yes, but yeah, yoga Pilates. I've been like doing it on and off, and it's just harder because there's not like a studio near my house, so I always have to travel. And once I have to travel, I'm lazy. So I'll start with like the lowest hanging fruit with it, which is the flower arrangement first.
Okay. Let me know how it goes. Yeah, I'm curious to see. Uh, Okay. But so going back to the summit, so we had, yeah, like the two events of like the business focused workshops, panels, and then the 2 days of actually traveling in Taipei together. One of my favorite memories actually still is like on that bus. Actually, there's two memories. Let's talk about favorite memories from what happened, or like silly memories. I think
Okay.
the first one was when we were on the bus, the tour bus, and then you were sitting in the
Yeah.
front. And then it's funny because, you usually have like a tour operator speaking, and then you're just like in the front with a microphone, just like talking into it, giving instructions. And then I remember thinking like, this is probably such a niche experience that won't be replicated ever again, where it's like we like planned an event and you're just in the front operating the store. And then the
Yeah.
second part was when Jennifer got stuck in her seatbelt. She got stuck in the seatbelt out of, yeah, it's just like all the things that could happen. She got stuck in it and it was so tightly wounded on her.
And it was like the first stop that we are getting off, you know. It was just
Yeah.
like the start of the trip. And I was like, oh my God, can things like be even more wrong, you know? Like like we just got out, like we were just gonna have fun at like 9 a.m. and then she got stuck with the
Yeah.
seatbelt. And I think the bus driver was also like pretty
He was
like
panicking.
yeah,
Yeah. But it's okay. We cut the belt and she got out.
memories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good memories. Okay, what about your favorite memories?
Oh, I think the cooking class actually.
Mm,
I think like you said, like anything that has to do with like teamwork, like putting like doing something with your hands. And actually the cooking class was your idea, right? We actually wanted to make like xiaolongbao and stuff.
mm,
So I think the place that we found was actually really good. They held a lot of foreigners before, so they were like pretty open and they could speak English. So I think that was like really helpful for most of our attendees. Um, I think like it was good for two parts. Like one was that like somehow one part or another, because maybe it was the day four of the event. So a
mm.
lot of people they already know each other, and somehow the groups that they were in were the groups that they were most suited to be in. Like my
Yeah.
group was like just quiet, we were just doing our own thing, you know, being introverts, and like it, it was just like the team dynamics was there, and other groups were like more happy, like they were rowdy but having fun together. So I think it was during the cooking class where I felt like, hey, you know, I think this has been cemented, that you know the friendships are already like there and they're already taking off because of how people interacted and how much fun they're having together. So I think that was like kind of a core memory for me. Yeah.
Do you feel like it takes like oh, interesting question because we're on the topic of friendship.
Yeah.
How long do you think that two new people or new people in general need to get to know each other for before feeling comfortable with each other and like actually being friends?
Wow. I think for me it takes longer. Like I
Yeah.
have to see the person very frequently, or I need to be able to speak to the person. Like for example, you and me, right? I think like we work together so much and it kind of like takes that bond to become like really close friends. But I think that's because like both of us we are like more we're not that open in that sense. But a
Mm,
lot of our attendees are pretty open. They're very willing to share their experiences. They open up to each other pretty quickly. So I
mm.
think it was more of like the circumstances of like how you have already built this community to be part of to be this open, right? Like people know that they are safe with the members around them. And I think that kind of like sped up the process.
Where do you
Mm.
think this trust comes from, right? Like
Mm.
there is a community, there's so many communities for like Asian women out there, right? But this one specifically, when we like we built it on certain foundations or like values, having them meet each other for this first time and then also like relaying their stories and being vulnerable, like where do you think that trust comes from? Yeah.
Oh, good question actually. I actually didn't think of it. Uh, but I think maybe it was also a good thing that we had our business talks first,
Mm,
because it was a space whereby you know nobody could escape. Like you don't have distractions. There's only one thing happening and you are just listening to one person talk at a time. So you already know like what kind of person they are,
mm,
what they've been through, where you know what kind of advice they have, or um maybe even listening to Tue, our keynote speaker on day one. She
mm.
and I, like, we are in different countries. We had very different experiences. She probably like had to push a lot more than I did coming from Vietnam and then moving to like America to US and all that. So, but you know, despite how different like our backgrounds were or like how different things were, I was able to relate to her. Like I was able to relate to her struggles. I was able to relate to the things that Asian families did and all that. So I think like it was that connection, the cultural part of it, but
Mm.
also being able to really hear the things that they have gone through. You kind of like have that instant connection that, hey, I know about you more now. I know you better. And I know about things that you might not have told other people because this was like a close event. Right?
Mm.
So that kind of like points probably like made it to the point whereby I can actually talk more to this person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there are like 40 people, 60 people in this event. You can't be friends with everyone like instantly,
Yeah.
but there will be more people that you connect with, and then you'll search for these people, right? And that's how you make, yeah.
Make friends. Yeah. I think, relating to Twiz talk,
Mm,
one thing I realized as you were speaking as well is just like how multifaceted she is, right? Like she's a CEO and she's a woman of color.
mm,
She is like a sister. She's a child of immigrants. Like there's so many layers and like dimensions of her, right? And so by sharing her experiences with us in this closed room, she gave off a sense of deeper vulnerability that we wouldn't have received from just like a random keynote or
yeah,
someone that we meet for the very first time. So it's almost at the summit, like a lot of people were vulnerable from the get-go. And then it was like, because you're vulnerable, I'm going to be vulnerable too. And I think this was just like throughout our summit that allowed people to bond and connect on a deeper level and hopefully take their friendships like even after the summit and like build it deeper, which I'm hoping, which I think it's happening,
yeah.
right?
I think like another part of Toya's talk was that I think it was a good decision that we made to actually put her as the first keynote speaker.
Mm,
Like other than the fact that she was phenomenal, I think one thing that she did really set the tone of the entire summit was that when she first started out her talk, she had like this corporate introduction of her. And she says like, this is how people usually introduce her, but she wants to get it out of the way, and she introduced herself in the personal way of like her name, right? Like
mm,
how her name was like being pronounced and how her Vietnamese name was actually is like how her name actually is pronounced. So
mm.
I think like her not focusing on the business part of it, the corporate part of it, or like just bring it over in just 1 minute and focusing on her experience herself, like it set a good kind of like landing point for other like talks after that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. She definitely set the tone for it and very grateful that we had such a good keynote.
I
Yeah. I don't know who's going to top her next year, but we'll see. Uh, okay. I would also want to bring up that I guess like the ending of the summit when it was all over. So for context, when it was the last day, it rained really hard. And then we were at the night market and then we're just like under umbrellas eating sticky tofu. I don't know. I personally was just like, I just want to enjoy my time kind of like with my friends and eat sticky tofu and like not care logistically. Like, how are
uh,
you feeling at the end of the day as well?
oh, I don't think I had any thoughts on my mind.
Oh
It was
yeah.
just
You're just like, I want to go to the what was that store that we kept going to?
oh yeah.
Oh, Poya. You're like, I just want to go to Poya.
I was like, I feel like now that I think about it, maybe it was like a coping mechanism or something. Like I just want to buy something. Like I want to feel like immense, like instant satisfaction of like getting something. So
Yeah.
my luggage was actually like overweight.
Oh, did you have to pay
Yeah.
extra?
No, I didn't. I took some of it out and then
Oh,
I put it in my carry-on. But yeah, I think that was actually how much I bought.
okay.
A lot of things. But yeah, I mean, I put it to use. But I think on the last day itself, yeah, we actually didn't get to like say a proper goodbye to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I know a lot of them met up like at one of the underground malls because it was raining. But I think for us, like we were already like dead. We want to go back and rest. And so we didn't join them. But I think that was fine in a sense because I had have enough trust that like friendships already were building up and like people were going to continue connecting with each other after this. So I was like, I just want to like get the day over and like have a good rest first before I reply to anyone.
Mm.
And I think like I was right in that sense because when I came back to Singapore, like we also had a post like summit meetup after that. And like I said, that was when I was in a better state to actually chat with people to learn more about them or for them to actually learn more about me as well. So I think yeah, it's nice to be in one space, but the idea which we had for the summit was for friendships to be long lasting, and I think we made that happen. So yeah, I honestly I really wasn't thinking of anything at that point of time. I just was eating stinky tofu, and then
Mhm.
after that I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back and sleep.
Yeah, I think it was a very satisfying feeling after like everything was over and then I was just sleeping again. I was like, oh, this is like the best feeling ever. I will say, so I was spoke to Ali recently, who is our programs manager with Sesmini, and she didn't go, but she was saying one of the ways that she saw like success from the summit was that people were still posting about it, still talking about it. Um, kind of like verbally sharing about the summit and how happy they were with it. So that was like definitely a very big win for Asian water women. And
Mm,
it's funny because I think when we had the media event in Singapore, we're like, oh, this is like
yeah.
so much work. Like, are we going to do it again? And then for this summit, we're like, we did 4 days, right? And then we're like, oh, that was so much work. We're never doing this again. And then now it's like, oh, like that was great. Should we do it
I
again?
know. You know, in Chinese, there's this word called 打脸.
Dalian. What does that mean?
It means that every time you say like, "Hey, I want to do this again," and you're doing it again, and you're like hitting your own face.
Like,
So
I'll
like,
do it again.
yeah,
I'll do it again.
like yeah, it's like don't trust what you say because like yeah, I think like that. I think that's what made it special, right? Like we have so much momentum going on, and we're like, hey, it's kind of like a waste to leave it here. Like maybe we should like just continue on this momentum.
Yeah.
I think that's why we tire ourselves out, you know, like
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of learnings, I think, from the 4 day summit. I think you
yeah,
and I both realized we're like, okay, let's make it more sustainable and maybe have certain themes. You mentioned
yeah,
having like, better themes for each event.
yeah.
So maybe it's like a wellness theme, maybe it's like a business theme or a travel theme. Like we could definitely tailor it to the needs of like the group, but in a more sustainable, holistic way. So yeah.
With
Is
it
there
doesn't like tire us.
yeah. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you want to do like in the future as well for awe or like yeah, to like build it out?
I think I still have like a lot of ideas for now, but it's like all pretty scattered. But the
Mhm.
idea is always to like bring the community back wherever they go, right? Having a space of like a safety net wherever they travel. So I know we kind of put this off for some time, but in Singapore I was like planning to host more events. But maybe like not just to drink and like eat, but to be able to experience things together. In Singapore, there's this thing whereby you can go on a tour with like a ex-gangster and then
Oh, that would be cool.
I've just been looking at things like that and I'll be like, hey, like would people be interested in joining this? Because I would want to learn more about the history of like different places, but also be able to chat with my friends after that. So it's still in the phase of planning, but smaller things like that. And then I think my energy right now will just be focused on like the larger summits that we plan. Also because I still have a full-time job. So
Yeah.
if it comes to the point whereby I'm finally doing my own thing, then maybe I could do more for the community. Yeah.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think the vision, to be honest, is like having the large event once a year with like a mixed business and travel element because that's what the community is for, and then maybe planning smaller scale summit events. And
Yeah.
then I feel, I mean, you've mentioned this before too, where it's like having like these focused itineraries or like
Mm.
resources for women to
Yeah.
use because I feel like the Asian female travel experience is very universal in that sense where it's like where do we find places like Poya, right? Or where do we find the best skincare, the best deals?
Yeah.
Where do I get the best massages? Like there was a girl, Renee, asking in the group already. And I was like,
Uh,
yes, we should be building something like this because what we want is very different from like maybe someone who's non-Asian would want, right? Like maybe they want to go bar hopping, but we're like, no, we want skincare like it's different. So I
The
think,
salads and all that.
yeah, all right. And like the best
This is why
deal.
I think
Huh.
this is why your business collective came out at a good time. Because
Yeah.
now I need to have someone to watch over me while I do this thing. Because like for the past month, I've just been like so busy and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I keep pushing it back. And I was like, okay, I need to kind of like make this itineraries for Singapore. At least like have a good starting point. But then like there was no one to watch over me to do it. So I kept like holding it back. It was very different from the summit because like we had like a group of people working together, right? And
Mm.
then I feel responsible towards the people that are working with me and
Hmm.
also the people who are attending. So like I kept pushing myself on. But for this it's like there's no deadline.
Yeah.
There's no one to hold me accountable and I'm just like pushing it away. So yeah, this is why the business collective came at a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And if I'm good at anything, it's hounding people to do stuff. So I'll definitely be there to help you.
I think that's true. That's very true. I yeah.
I will. Oh, for
It was,
context too, anyone listening to this podcast, the Business Collective is a community for solopreneurs, mostly, Asian female solopreneurs who are working on like a project or an idea. And then it's going to be like a really great place for like masterminding, accountability, like Joe mentioned. And actually, yeah, like meeting friends in the space because it is lonely. And I think when you tell someone what you're doing and like the deadline of what you're working on, then like you've mentioned, like you'll have more accountability and more like that fire.
right. Like the motivation.
Yeah. And like the fire under your butt to be like, oh, shoot, like I need to do this. I told Emily that I would do this. And it's even though it's like your thing. Okay. But yeah, to wrap it up, I want to leave it on like a big bang. But I'm trying to think where I guess, oh, actually, if you were to like meet another like Joanna, like someone who reminds you of yourself, right?
Oh,
Who's also kind of starting her career or trying to navigate her way throughout the world, maybe in like her early 20s,
yeah.
what would you tell her? Or, like what would you advise her on? It could be anything.
Wow. I think there's this piece of advice that was actually from the first company that I was in, which is where we worked together. And there was this founder that she mentioned something that stuck with me all the way, even until now, which was don't how wait, let me think about how she said it. It was kind
Mhm.
of like something like um don't laugh at stupid ideas or like even if you think that an idea is stupid, you can laugh at it, but give it a benefit of doubt.
Mm.
Because whatever ideas that you think are like might not work or like maybe we wouldn't say stupid or maybe unfeasible, it
Mm.
may turn out to work out in the end or even kind of like open up many more doors for you. So I think it was kind of like a philosophy that I had even after that when I went for a traineeship at Google. I like whatever I did or even like the summit itself, there were a lot of things that I thought were unfeasible, but would I mean like it kind of like proved me wrong in the end. And so these days I keep telling people that, hey, I like being proven wrong because then that means that I learned something out of it. I have another story to tell. And I think that was like much more valuable than anything. So a lot of people like they have like very interesting ideas and they don't really work on it
Yeah.
because they feel like, hey, it's not feasible. But then like I'm like now I have this evidence of saying that, hey, if I can plan a large scale in-person event when I'm not even in that city itself, and like I'm working with people from all different like time zones and all over the world, then I don't think there's anything else that cannot be done. Yeah.
Ah, no, I love that. It's very, it's true. And I also feel like people who think that it cannot happen, they're already going into that scenario, like about to fail, or like they don't believe it can. Yeah, it's like the mindset. But I mean, yeah, like if you go in thinking like, okay, this is something I'm going to build, or I'm at least going to try, at least you're giving yourself the option to succeed, right? Such a different like mindset shift.
I think it's kind of like you can still
Yeah.
question and
Yeah.
hey, I really don't think this is going to work because of ABC. But
Hmm.
then in the case whereby if like maybe it's really just going to go that way or like oh sorry, what I was trying to say was that like, if even if you give objections and stuff, like leaving that space whereby you're like just hey, even if I try, like what would I lose out of it? And if it's not money, I think because like money is like my bottom line of like things that I don't want to lose. So
Hmm.
if I don't lose money, I just lose a bit of time. But even then, you now can be sure that this doesn't work out. And
Hmm.
then you can put it on your list that, hey, now I learned something because I've already done this, rather than not doing it and you can't like give an explanation of why this wouldn't work out because this is just all in your mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Or the fact that you just were afraid to try. Like that would be disappointing, right? To tell someone.
Like
Yeah.
I always think back about it, like when I'm 80 years old, like do I want to regret not have done this? You
Hmm.
know? Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's really good advice. And anyone listening on the podcast too, like keep that in mind in navigating anything in any part of life. If anyone wants to connect with you, because you have like no social media,
I do. I have social media right now.
you have like
LinkedIn
a
is a
secret TikTok.
I don't know, maybe sometimes I'm still also thinking about the video on TikTok. So maybe in the future it'll be open. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But right now, Facebook is another way. I'm actually starting to write more on Facebook because there are lesser people there.
Hmm.
So I met with like my closest friends over there or like women in the community.
Mhm.
LinkedIn is the easiest way to reach me. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'll link it down below or link it in the show notes or anything like that. But it was so fun talking to you, Joe, as always.
Oh,
And I'm
thanks for
sure, yeah, I'm sure we'll have so many more adventures together in the future as well. And then
Oh, for sure.
be back on the podcast again.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks, Joe. See you soon. Bye.